Number 5. The Queen and the Royal Family.
Golden thread running through the generations. That's how one of Queen Elizabeth II's many prime ministers described her reign. The longest in British history.
One of the most concerningly accurate predictions our boy Michelle predicted was that in 2022, Queen Elizabeth would pass and her son would take her place, but abdicate his position. In his original writings in 1555, Nostradamus wrote, "At the end of the war, the great powers change. Near the shore, 3 beautiful children are born, ruin to the people when they are of age, to change the country's kingdom and see it grow no more. The children are Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip's grandchildren, Prince William, Henry, and Princess Beatrice." The conflict could refer to the 1982 Malvinas War between the UK. Princess Diana gave birth to William 7 days after the war ended. Could Nostradamus be claiming that the end of Queen Elizabeth could be the end of the monarchy? Well, another writing of his adds to that. Check this out. Because they disapproved of his divorce, a man who later they considered unworthy, the people will force out the king of the islands, and a man will replace him who never expected to be king. Now, if you're like me and you struggle a bit to decipher centuries-old riddles, there are experts like Mario Reading, a British author, to do it for us. Reading explains the thinking, writing that after the Queen's death, Prince Charles will be crowned and become king of the islands. That part's already happened. However, a certain proportion of the British population, following his divorce from Diana, still persists that the pressure on him is so great and his age so much against him that Charles will agree to abdicate in favor of his elder son, Prince William. So it sounds like before he was even born, Nostradamus could sense that no one wanted King Charles. That obvious, huh? And hey, here's a prediction from me. By the end of this video, you'll subscribe to Top 5 Scary for scary videos every day and the best host in the game. I got a strong feeling I'm right. Number 4. Civil unrest. In that big old book of chilling quatrains, our good friend Nostradamus had this to write. "The trumpet shakes with great discord, an agreement broken. Lifting the face to heaven, the bloody mouth will swim with blood, the face anointed with milk and honey lies on the ground." Probably the most outright sinister sounding of any of Nostradamus' prediction, unless the trumpet shaking with great discord just means there's going to be an awesome marching band parade going through the world. This one could mean a lot, but analysts and experts of Nostradamus' work generally agree that they think this is predicting a time of great civil unrest, dated for 2022. In the last couple years, we've already seen more civil unrest globally than we have before, with protests all over the globe for a number of social causes and pressing concerns. It's not unlikely at all to think that this sleeping discontent in the masses is going to keep rising, and it's very likely there will be more protests. This could tie in with a point we made in the previous Nostradamus video, in which he highlighted a prediction for 2022 that said he believed that inflation and starvation would rise so much that "so high the price of wheat that man is stirred to his fellow man to eat in his despair." Now obviously that could be taken literally, and I sincerely hope not, because I don't think I would taste good at all. I'm a bit stringy and I eat terribly, so I would be awful for your diet. No, instead, myself and others think that it's alluding to the eat the rich sentiment and movement, and that these two predictions are linked together. You know, we've already seen so much unrest and so many protests for years from people struggling to get by, and as wages stay the same and working conditions worsen across the globe, it's increasingly worrisome that maybe someday it's all boiling into something really, really big. Finishing off in the original quatrain, Nostradamus wrote, "Sooner and later, you will see great changes made, dreadful horrors and vengeances." So maybe there's some positivity out of it, you know, some great changes. Maybe we'll all get a 4-day weekend. We just have to ignore the dreadful horrors, I guess. Number 3, a world at war. War! What is it good for? Absolutely nothing, I think, is the usual accepted answer. Well, that good-for-nothing horseman of the apocalypse is always rearing its head, and Nostradamus predicted that we'd be experiencing a lot of them. A passage reads, "Blue head shall white head harm in such degree, as France's good to both shall e'er amount." Now, I gonna be honest with you, I have no idea what that means. That doesn't really sound like much, unless there's a war of blue-headed people. I found one reading saying that this was predicting that France would be beaten at the World Cup, which is definitely possible, but I feel like Nostradamus would shoot a little higher than making sports bets. Most analysts seem to think that this points towards a war, so take a listen to this passage as well. This one reads, "7 months the great war, people dead of evil doing. Ruin ever shall not fall to the king." Now this prediction spells it out a little more clearly. Nostradamus thinks that there's going to be a great war that will spill over and into Europe, and that France will be a key player and a battleground for it. It's easy to see why this prediction could ring true, especially with how things are, going the way they are right now. There's already enough tension brewing, and I think the threat of a world war is something that's kind of looming in the back of everyone's minds already while we watch the news. While there is always a war burning somewhere across this globe, this prediction specifically outlines that this could evolve into something much, much bigger. Into a great war, possibly, instead of one of those humble good ones. I'm joking, of course, there are no good ones. Possibly involving the entire planet in a global conflict. And while I'm sure a great war might make for a few good Hollywood action movies years after the fact, I think we should all work to avoid a third world war. Most trilogies usually have a really disappointing third one, you know? Let's just hope for our sake that Nostradamus isn't accurate on this one. Number 2. An asteroid. A great fire will fall from the sky for 3 nights. The cause will appear both stupefying and marvelous. Shortly afterwards, there will be an earthquake. I doubt Nostradamus had ever seen fireworks, so the prediction of this being that we're all gonna have a great party with fireworks for 3 days and then we're gonna party so much it'll rumble the earth, I don't think that's super likely. No, fire from the sky and earthquakes are never a good thing. That's usually kind of the symptoms of like apocalyptic stuff alongside boiling seas and demon walking the earth, fire raining down. Now this line could refer to a couple things, possibly. It could be alluding to something man-made, like a strike of some kind. But translators and experts of Nostradamus' writings believe that this could be referring to an asteroid strike on the planet with devastating impact. Asteroids pass by the Earth every single day already, and the likelihood of one colliding with the planet and causing serious damage is a real possibility, and all of us going the way of the dinosaurs. Fortunately for us, NASA has been cooking up predictions of their own, and they assure us that there is no danger of any collisions on record for 2022, or for the next 100 years, for that matter, claims a recent study. The asteroid Apophis was said to be flying worryingly close to Earth's orbit, on track for a possible collision in 2029, and as well, a slight risk of collision in 2068. But thankfully, continued monitoring and updated scans have shown that everything should be all clear for the next 100 years. Nice to know that the seer can get wrong every once in a while, you know? Keeps them humble. Of course, there is always the possibility, like I mentioned, that great fire falling from the sky could be referring to something a little darker than an asteroid. Like I said, maybe something man-made or something a bit more cosmic, like say a celestial fire of some kind. Speaking of celestial fires, actually funny, that's so funny, I was just talking about celestial fires earlier. Let's get on to the next point, which is number 1, Celestial Fire and the New World Order. Celestial Fire and the New World Order sounds like they would have been the absolute coolest 80s prog rock supergroup. I bet their first album was fantastic and the rest of them fell off. Disregard that fantasy for a minute, and let's get back to the topic at hand. Nostradamus' predictions. In his big old book of prophecies, Nostradamus wrote that there would be a celestial fire on the royal edifice. So what does that mean? King Charles's house is about to catch fire? Well, something about the word celestial really throws this one for me. You know, celestial is not an adjective that you just toss in willy-nilly. I feel like that's reserved for when something is descending from the cosmos, end of days, apocalypse stuff. Well, not to worry, this prediction gets worse. They always get worse. The prediction goes on to state that through the ashes of this celestial fire on the royal edifice will rise a new order, hey, another prog rock group, and that an unlikely alliance between 2 great powers will come together. What those 2 great powers could be, though, is anyone's guess. Is it Marvel and DC? Apple and Android? Coke and Pepsi? Whoever it may be, it's said that things will never be the same and the alliance's effect will not be good for us. Now, Nostradamus wrote many predictions on the royal family, and some even claim that he accurately predicted Queen Elizabeth's passing. He had this to add on about King Charles specifically. Because they disapproved of his divorce, a man who they later considered unworthy, the people will force out the king of the islands, a man will replace who never expected to be king. Could this be referring to King Charles being replaced in favor of a new king? Could this be related to this new world order Nostradamus is predicting, with someone no one ever expected to be king, and that unlikely alliance getting formed? We're not sure yet, but as time goes on, more and more of Nostradamus' predictions keep turning out to be true, so we'll find out soon enough, I'm sure, and you'll find out here. Number 5, the Great Fire of London. The Great Fire of London was caused in 1666 after a bakery caught flame and spread rapidly throughout the city, engulfing the city in a storm of flame that lasted for a 3-day blaze, consuming just about everything in its path. The bakery was owned by Thomas Fariner, who went on record saying he was very, very, very sorry. It was the kind of freak accident that no one could have possibly seen coming, except of course if you were renowned predictor and possible psychic Michel de Nostradamus, who had this eerie prediction written down. Listen to this little quatrain. The blood of the just will commit a fault at London. Burnt through lightning of 23's the 6, the ancient lady will fall from her high place. Several of the same sect will be killed. We really need to look into getting like an in-channel researcher and translator for Nostradamus, because instead of that, you just got me, a guy who passed high school English with a 51%, but I will do my level best for you. We can interpret 23's the 6 as an equation, reading 20 times 3 plus 6, which would give us 66. The Great Fire, of course, started in 1666 and burned for 3 days straight. Seems a little too convenient to just be a coincidence, right? Now the next question though, what is the ancient lady? The spirit of London itself? A way too early prediction about Queen Elizabeth? It's also a little bit off the mark with the quote about lightning, since it wasn't a lightning strike that started the Great Fire, but rather a bakery fire, unless you consider that Thomas Farriner's idea to open a bakery was a lightning in a bottle idea, but I'm gonna be honest, that's enough of a stretch, it's making my shoulders hurt. Now I'd like to try a little prediction of my own. I don't quite have the gift, but I've got a knack for this sort of thing. I'm having a vision. I see that the best scary content on the web is at top 5 scary videos, and if you like it, you should subscribe? I don't know what it means though. Here's an ominous one for you.
Humans, it says, are without doubt responsible for global warming and will pay an ever-increasing price. That includes more of what we've already seen this year: parched fields, forests on fire, and deadly heat.
Like the sun, the head shall sear the shining sea. The Black Sea's living fish shall all the boil. When Rhodes and Genoa half-starved shall be, the local folk to cut them up shall toil. Well, thankfully, we're not quite at the point of literal boiling fish in the sea, but that's not to say we're not rapidly approaching that reality. It's easy to interpret, like the sun, the head shall sear the shining sea, as a warning for the increasing rise in temperatures we've seen across the globe this year. 2022 has already been a record-breaking year for climate change, and not in a way that's particularly good for anybody. July of 2022 was one of the hottest months globally, among the top 10 hottest in global history. But it's fine, I'm sure. We just need to walk to work a little bit more, use paper straws, and we'll really get a handle on this thing. The death of coral reefs, eradication of natural habitats, and the worrisome decline in fish populations worldwide could all point to Nostradamus being right about this one, predicting boiling fish and the common folk starving. Not trying to scare you too much, but some experts predict that if we keep going at the rate we're at, the world's oceans could be totally empty of all fish by 2048. For my own sake, I sincerely hope Nostradamus is wrong about us in this one, because if I'm ever at a pub and I can't get a clam chowder or fish and chips, I just don't know that any of this will be worth it anymore. Number 3. Man, did this guy only ever predict depressing stuff? Could he not have just predicted just once that maybe it would be beautiful weather year-round, the Leafs would have a good season, and the McRib would come back? No, sadly it was mostly doom prophecies. Check this one out. No abbots, monks, no novices to learn. Honey shall cost far more than candle wax. So high the price of wheat that man is stirred, his fellow man to eat in despair. International political instability, the pandemic, and Brexit have all contributed pretty nefariously to inflation. And let me tell you, as a guy who struggles to balance his checkbook, it has been a nightmare finding cheap honey. I'm serious, go on Amazon right now. Google raw honey and candle wax. Of all the things for a sage to be completely accurate on, I wasn't expecting it to be the economics of honey and wax, but hey, it's real. This is a personal issue I'm gonna have to set aside for now. But one has to wonder too with the phrase, his fellow man to eat in despair. Did Nostradamus have some insight into the popularity of the Eat the Rich movement? Well, that's always been a popular thing to spray paint over a bank wall or write on a poster board to take to a protest. After the pandemic, that sentiment has been more pronounced than ever in recent years, with large swaths of the population rightfully being upset about wage and income disparity that exists. It's hard enough for the common man to make a living out there, let alone being able to afford good, reliable honey. And if you know a supplier for that, drop a link please. My DMs are always open to talk honey. Number 2. If you asked me 5 years ago to predict what the future of finances would look like, I don't think I ever would have guessed the rise of NFTs or cryptocurrency. I mean, I don't think anyone could have estimated that we'd ever have an economy based around trading pictures of bored apes wearing sailor hats. Well, except of course Nostradamus could have predicted it, because he predicts everything. Could the French seer have predicted cryptocurrency? Take a quick listen to this. The copies of gold and silver inflated, which after the theft were thrown into the lake, at the discovery that all is exhausted and dissipated by the debt, all scripts and bonds will be wiped out. Recently, gold has been surging, and a whole wave and movement was born around moving towards cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, as a new infallible gold standard. Waves of Silicon Valley engineers and executives have left their high-level positions to pursue cryptocurrency startups, and the push to try and decentralize currency and move towards cryptocurrency has been very real in recent years, and growing more and more. Could we really move away from physical cash altogether? Especially after the pandemic, we've seen more and more businesses and operations move towards cashless transactions altogether, moving towards all of our money being stored digitally, which stresses me out a lot because I have a hard time enough managing money when it's in front of me, let alone when it's imaginary. Maybe it's a lot to ask that Nostradamus could have predicted so much the idea of digital currency, but there's a lot to think about as ideas of a new form of currency taking shape. I've got to say though, if he really was as much of a prophet as they say he was, he would have invested in Bitcoin early, started seeing those real profits. Number 1. Keeping on his predictions about the technology of the future. Could Nostradamus have predicted the rise of AI and the looming threat of a technological takeover? Honestly, more likely than you think. Feast your ear holes on this little stanza. The moon in the full of night over the high mountain. The new sage with a lone brain sees it. By his disciples invited to be immortal. Eyes to the south. Hands in bosoms, bodies in the fire. Now, this does sound a little bit like something a wizard in a cave might whisper you over a crystal ball before sending you on a journey, but bear with it. Some experts firmly believe that this could be an allusion to the rise of the digital era. The new sage with a lone brain sees it by his disciples invited to be immortal. I don't want to stroke his ego too much by referring to them as sages, but Mark Zuckerberg has made it incredibly clear that he believes the future of the world and humanity as a whole is going to be virtual in his quest to create the metaverse, creating a world where literally the body will be left behind. Bodies in the fire, invited to be immortal. Do you think we could get to an era where we start living like we're in the Matrix, uploading our consciousness to a digital realm? What was once pure fantasy is encroaching on our reality closer and closer with each passing day, and I honestly think it'll be sooner than we're expecting before we're all living in that digital world. Number 5. Mars landing. Among his many criticisms, Nostradamus wrote a light on Mars failing. Now initially it seems like just a vague statement until you remember that a few years ago the Opportunity rover, which was traveling through Mars, broadcasted its last message from the surface of the red planet. Its last message read, "My battery is low and it's getting dark," which was the final transmission received from the Opportunity rover to NASA when the solar-powered robot was caught in a massive dust storm, described as one of the biggest dust storms observed on Mars, which engulfed the planet whole and turned the day into night, smothering the poor robot's battery, leading it to send that final, poignant transmission. Now, could this be the light on Mars failing that Nostradamus was referring to? It's hard to argue that it doesn't match up just a little bit eerily. I mean, come on, a light on Mars failing, and here you have a sad robot saying that its battery is dying out. Of course, this won't be the end of mankind's journey to the red planet. Succeeding the Opportunity rover is the Curiosity rover, which is currently roving around the rock right now as you watch this video. Elon Musk, billionaire and Twitter poster, has made no secret whatsoever of his goals for Mars, calling it his life's greatest work and a mission central to humanity. SpaceX has made several of their own predictions about sending men to Mars, with their earliest estimates being that by 2030 we will have manned crews walking the surface of Mars. One has to wonder if Nostradamus could have ever predicted man walking on the surface of another planet. It's hard for us to imagine that, but Musk and his company insists it'll be sooner than we think. Now, Nostradamus also predicted back in his book of prophecies that you would subscribe to Top 5 Scary for the best scary stories and content on the web. Was he right? Because I'm pretty sure he was right. Number 4. The atomic bomb. Could Nostradamus have predicted humanity's darkest invention? Very possible. A quatrain seemingly references, impossibly, the bombings of the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II. In his quatrain, Nostradamus wrote, "Within 2 cities there will be scourges the likes of which has never seen. Famine within plague. People put out by steel, crying to the great immortal God for relief." Hey, Nostradamus really was a cheery fella, wasn't he? Now, I like to think of myself as a bit of a skeptic. I took the online test and it said I'm 70% Scully and 30% Mulder. But even I've got to admit this one lines up pretty eerily. The 2 cities could very easily be referring to the 2 cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The scourges the likes of which is never seen, being about atomic weapons as a whole, the controversial nature of which goes without any further explanation. I mean, you can find about 1,000 quotes from just about everybody involved with the Manhattan Project expressing their deep regret for what they did. The famine and plague could be referencing the radiation sickness and numerous other issues that arose following the immediate aftermath. As well, the line, "people put out by steel," could be an allusion to the man-made nature of the desolation, that it was constructed by man and delivered through an airplane and a concentrated team effort rather than any natural causes. It's worth bringing up that Nostradamus did have a personal first-hand experience treating plague victims, which does raise the possibility, of course, that he could be referring far more literally to 2 cities ravaged by literal plague, but it does beg just a little speculation as to why it lines up so well. Number 3. JFK. John F. Kennedy Jr. is probably one of the most famous and tragic presidents in American history, whose term was infamously cut short by an assassin. The ancient task will be completed from on high. Evil will fall on the great man. A dead innocent will be accused of the deed. The guilty on will remain in the mist. Okay, there is a lot to uncover and unpack here. Firstly, a dead innocent will be accused of the deed. Now, the official story is that Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin of JFK, although 2 days after his arrest, he was fatally shot. He insisted that he was just a patsy to cover up the conspiracy, and despite the official evidence pointing towards Oswald as the culprit, public opinion polls in recent years have shown that the majority of Americans do not believe the official story and suspect that Oswald was a false flag, although we could be talking for absolutely hours if we go on about that tangent. Do some reading on this one at home. This is my favorite conspiracy theory of all time, and once you start reading about it, it is going to be all you are doing for the next week. There is so much to uncover, we could not possibly do it in 10 minutes. Continuing on the prophecy, the ancient task will be completed from on high. Evil will fall on the great man. In a very literal sense, this could be referring to the fact that JFK was shot from an elevated position, but there is also a widely recognized conspiracy theory that JFK was ordered to be assassinated by his own government, which could possibly be referring to from on high. If Lee Harvey Oswald really was a cover story, like he claims and conspiracists claim, then that would mean that the guilty on will remain in the mist, possibly referring to the mystery that's lingered on about the event as a whole for 60 years. It's very likely we will never uncover the real story or the truth behind what happened that day. Maybe Nostradamus knew, but he's not telling us much these days. Doesn't pick up his phone that often, doesn't answer my calls. Number 2, King Henry II. King Henry II was, well, you can probably guess. He was the King of France for a bit. He was the King of France from 1547 until his reign was tragically cut short bitterly in 1559. A tragedy that had befallen the people of France as he was slain in an accident during a tourney. Who could have predicted it, of course, except, oh, you know how this bit goes by now. Let's all say it on 3. 1, 2, 3. Nostradamus. Of course he did. It's the title of the video. Alright, let's hear what the quatrain said. The young lion will overcome the older one. He will pierce his eyes through a golden cage. The 2 wounds will ensure a cruel death on the field of combat in a single battle. I like that, like all of Nostradamus' prophecies sounds like something that a wizard would tell you in a cave before giving you a sacred sword and telling you to embark on a quest to save the kingdom. Anyway, let's put on our little interpreting cap. King Henry was accidentally mortally injured when during a joust, splinters from the broken lance of his opponent, Gabriel de Lorge, was lodged inside King Henry's eye. From there, the king developed brain damage and sepsis and would pass from his injury a few days later. Definitely sounds like the cruel death that Nostradamus had predicted in his little prophecy there. Now, it wasn't quite the field of combat though, instead occurring during what was supposed to be a game. What can I say? They just played harder than we do. It's all fun and games until someone loses an eye and then France no longer has a king and you have to retreat to your estate in Normandy in disgrace and live out the rest of your days as an exile. Did everybody else's mom always tell them that as a kid whenever they would go out to play? Nostradamus and King Henry II were actually personal friends, making this prediction just a little bit more tragic than usual. Nostradamus had referred to him as the invincible King Henry II, which is a bit ironic, sadly, since it turned out he was very vincible. Number 1, the French Revolution. Now, depending on where you lived in 17th century France, maybe you didn't think the French Revolution was actually that dark a thing. Maybe you thought it was great, actually. I did hear at one point there was some cake being passed around to everybody. Wouldn't know. Wasn't there. But I can tell you that Nostradamus did seem to predict the revolution almost exactly. Why don't you take yourself a little ear gander at this? From the enslaved people, songs, chants, and demands, the princes and lords are held captive in prisons. In the future, by such headless idiots, these will be taken as divine utterances. Before the war comes, the Great Wall will fall, the king will be executed, his death coming too soon will be lamented. The guards will swim in the blood. Near the river Seine, the soil will be bloodied. Hey, this one I almost don't even need that translator for. I feel like I can actually kind of understand this one, straight up. It sounds fairly plain and simple, and really just sounds like someone describing the French Revolution. The Great Wall falling could be referring to the storming of the Bastille prison, which was located near the Seine River, and was a site of criminal execution. This is where the guillotine was, and the beginning of the revolution. Could the guillotine be referring to literal headless idiots? The king will be executed? Well, that definitely happened. The only difference in Nostradamus' prediction is that he said it would be lamented. And while I'm sure the king's royal family was very upset, the people of France at the time seemed pretty excited to see him go. The soil being bloodied could be a dramatization or a metaphoric way of speaking to all the violence conducted in the name of the French Revolution. I've got to say, it's pretty strange how well Nostradamus was able to predict the French Revolution and as well the passing of King Henry II, but maybe he's got a home turf advantage for this sort of thing. You can just really focus in that hyperactive lens on anything involving France.